Welcome to the Wrestling Philosophy Show, where we discuss unique perspectives and beliefs on the sport of wrestling. Give us a follow or subscribe on various social media platforms, including YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Enjoy the show.
It's time to start planning for next season's tournaments. Be sure you have Smitty's corner rugs on your mats to protect them and keep them clean. Get a hold of him directly at smitty43952@gmail.com. If you have a tournament, it's the way to go. It creates a custom coach's box so your tournament runs efficiently and keeps the mats clean since they use a top spray MRSA killer. In this episode, we sit down with Peter Cimoroni. He shares the origin story of his Bloodtime Podcast, shares some Northeast Ohio wrestling history, and talks about his network through the sport of wrestling. Thanks, Coach, for having us on your show. Hope you guys enjoy this one. Coach Peter Cimoroni, welcome.
Jared, what's going on, man? Love this home and home, right? It's kind of like when we used to play golf, home and home, one country club back to the other. So it's great to have you on my show, and I love being on yours.
Yeah, that was great. That was great coming up to your place and seeing what you have going on there and seeing your studio. It was great, and having that conversation. We've known each other for a while here, and we talked I think in the fall about jumping on each other's show. So welcome. For our listeners, let's can you share your origin story, your wrestling beginnings?
Sure. Well, Jared, it's interesting. I started the germination of getting into the sport when I was an obese 7th grader. I was 4'11" and 163 and a half pounds.
Wow.
With a 41-inch waist. And my baby brother, he was a blessing, a surprise. We had a baby brother who was 13 years younger than me, born on the 4th of July, 1970. And I looked at a home film of me run. I was in an all-star game in a baseball game, and I crushed him, and I barely made it to second base because I was so fat.
Oh, geez.
Almost thrown out, right? Like, if you were just a normal, skinny kid, I would have made a home run. But and that generation, our generation, nobody was fat. So I was like one of maybe 2 kids in my whole class that were fat. And so I went to my dad, who had wrestled at Shaker Heights High School, and my uncle, who was the first state place winner and captain in the history of Cleveland Heights High School, Lenny Arslanian. Yeah, he's an Arslanian. And he took 3rd in the state in 1956. And I said, what can I do? And they go, well, dude, first and foremost, you got to get your act together the way you eat. So I went to my doctor, and he put me on basically what's like a kind of a modified Atkins diet, if you will.
Okay.
A lot of lean meats, vegetables, all whole foods, a little bit of carbohydrates. And I went 90 days without sugar. And I went from 163 to 133, grew 2 inches, and I went from a 41-inch waist to a 32-inch waist.
Holy cow.
Yeah, and then by the time I was in high school, I was a 4-sport letterman, and wrestling really was my core because I played football at 152 pounds, 5'7", but I was the center. I was the center, but I was a piece of iron because of that core strength and that that mentality, the wrestling mentality. So I didn't give a shit. Can we swear on this?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I didn't give a shit if the guy was, 220 pounds. I had pads on. Mm-hmm. I was more concerned about a 132 pounder without pads on that went through the same thing I did on the mat, right?
You've been through the fire, right?
Right. So that was that. And then, I wasn't a great wrestler, but I really got better. And then in the Beechwood room, we had Ricky Stone, who was 2nd, 1st, and 3rd in the state. And he was my drill partner for 2 years. The year he won the state title at 119, I was a 132 pounder. So I was in the mix, but then I blew out my knee at the section. I was beating the kid who took 4th in the state from Chardon, and I was beating him. And that was it. That was my senior year. So I never made state, never made district. And so I went to Dayton as a walk-on, made it, and went to Carroll. My knee blew out again. And so I got into coaching. And so by the time I was a junior in college, I was coaching, and I had the real honor of being able to coach at both my alma maters, First as the head assistant coach at Beechwood. And those 3 years were our glory years. We took 4th, 5th, and 7th in the state.
Wow.
And we had our first multiple state champion in David Sternberg. And I coached lifelong friends. David is a lifelong friend. Michael Goldberg took place twice in the state, essentially is like one of my dearest friends. And then I coached Scott Peters, whose son Maverick is our producer on Bloodtime.
Right.
And Scott is literally closer to me than a brother. I can't explain the relationship. It's just beautiful.
That's awesome.
And so, and then I was able to coach when I was getting my master's at John Carroll University as the first GA in the history of the program. And my very first year, I coached Nick D'Angelo to his national title at 190. I was kind of like one of his, like the assistants do, right? They're the private coaches, right?
Yep.
Room. While he was a lot bigger than me, there was a lot of things that we really vibed on. And I sat in the seat right next to the iconic and legendary and Hall of Fame Tony DiCarlo. So that was, I cut my teeth on Dom Marino, a 6 Hall of Fame guy, and Tony DiCarlo. They named John Carroll's, sports facility after him, next to Don Shula. So, I really was blessed to have those types of mentors as coaches, and progressed on there and became the head coach at Beechwood twice, and now the head coach at Chagrin Falls.
Right.
So that's kind of my coaching pedigree.
That's very unique, right? Getting to coach alongside those guys. That's awesome. And now sit at Chagrin Falls. And we talked briefly, this past year, obviously, we all know it's been a very difficult as a coach, right? As administrators, as a coach, as a friend to these wrestlers, trying to get them through this crazy time. But you mentioned you just had on your show 3-year captains, which is a great idea, and kind of documenting what they went through as young adults through this whole thing. I guess, what are some of the things you learned, going through this as a coach? And you've seen wrestling for how many years, and this is something totally new, right? Usually it's like, all right, you go in the fall, we're gonna have this plan, and then it kind of changes every day. But anything you learned personally?
Yeah, I think 2 things were flat out slap me in the face every day. Is my empathy quotient went through the roof. I went completely empathetic. And so anything that these kids brought to me that they were having trouble with, I just gave them the floor. If they had to take space, I gave them space. One of my captains had to stop wrestling. He went to quarantines, and he said, "Coach, I'm losing my mind." I said, "Dude, go take care of yourself, and I'm there for you." And his father sent me a beautiful text saying, "Thank you for being so empathetic and compassionate about my son." And his brother was, one of our studs 2 years ago. He made the district tournament, won a couple of matches in the district tournament heavyweight. So comes from a great family. And his father is the head of operations for the entire school system in Chagrin Falls.
Oh, wow.
This is an accomplished family. And so that was number one, empathy wise. And in that too, my discipline obviously got a lot more relaxed, if you will, while still having to maintain. So I shortened the practice, Jared, and I went an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half, really tight, like a college, like a high level college practice. And we didn't really take a break except for a couple of water breaks, and that was it. Just boom, 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 boom. Just got them in, got them out. And then the other thing was really the coaching of the child, but also the parent. I was coaching the parent. I was coaching sometimes the administration, because this was such a new thing.
Right.
And
wrestling in itself is different, right? I mean, compared to these other sports.
The flexibility of every day facing something different, something that's not going to be positive usually. And so being able to pivot and to move on a dime, if you will, and to make determinations that are really empathetic and compassionate, while still maintaining a wrestling program, which is, meritocracy, man. This is the toughest sport on the planet. So, marrying those two things, being compassionate with running a wrestling program, really stretched me, and it took its toll on me. I got COVID in January. On January 10th, I was diagnosed. Got it from my assistant coach, which I'm sure is, it's a very common story, right? And then a couple of weeks after that, I got hit with diverticulitis, and I was down 129 pounds.
Oh my!
End of February, yeah. So, it was a very emotional, stressful time. But I got to tell you, we bonded, and the kids just are magnificent, and the parents, the community at Schrin Falls is magnificent, and blessed to have them. But it easily, by far, not even a close second, my hardest coaching year ever. So.
Right. I can say the same. I haven't been at it as long as you, or have the stories you have, but that's my concern as a coach is, what's going to look like. Are we going to lose some coaches along the way? Or I know we already have, but officials too. There was a tough year, and the time away from family it takes to build these teams and lead these young men is not easy, right?
No.
Where do you see the sport headed? The future of the sport. You've seen changes in the sport along the years, but through this, is there anything you're seeing down the road?
Yeah, well, I think that what is concerning to me is the club scenario and the coach shopping.
Mm-hmm.
I think that those two things are great for the individual. I think very deleterious for the sport. I think you need to build, and one of the biggest things, one of my guys that I started Wrestlers in Business with, I saw this past Friday at a clinic that Mitch Clark did at Beachwood.
Aaron Grossman.
Aaron Grossman, yeah. And so Aaron said, Coach, we're struggling in Aurora because Mike Ryba had a horrible fall and accident. I don't know if you knew this or not, Jared.
No, I did not.
Yeah, Mike Ryba about 2 months ago, month and a half ago, fell off a ladder and broke 7 ribs.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, he was in bad shape. He was in the ICU for a while, and he's done. He's pretty much done right now. But Aaron said, "Look, I want to find a coach like you that built a family first." Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to lose that because people are more concerned about outcomes. Mm-hmm. So my philosophy, Jared, is that I want to graduate great human beings with a focus on wrestling, because great wrestling and winning come easy or easier if you have great human beings surrounding you.
Right.
And so you have all those underpinnings of great humanity. You have dedication, you have fealty, you have focus, you have determination, and you have a work ethic that is intrinsic in a great human being. You couple that with a little bit of talent in our sport, and you got a great wrestler.
Right.
And I've seen many guys I've coached over the years, particularly at Beachwood, that had no business physically being in the state finals or podium, putting themselves on the podium. And we just shook our heads like, how did we get here? And we knew it because we bonded. And we said, we're not going to be denied.
Right.
And that's part of the reason why I started Bloodtime. I said, I just want to put out content that will not be denied, undeniable content of great human beings telling great stories.
Yeah. So the origin. I mean, you kind of shared a little bit there, but 50, 60 episodes in, right? And what was the origin? What was the? You've always been a marketer, right? Businessman, right. And now here you are sharing your stories with others through the gift of conversation. Share the origin story of your podcast, Bloodtime.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, the podcast really came from about 5 or 6 guys that came back and taught me, and they're doing some magnificent things with the lessons they learned in the wrestling room in the real world. And so they've taken those and they've evolved those lessons and brought them to organizations like Wrestlers in Business. This was Grossman's brainchild. He came to me first, and then we got Matt Delguide, and we got Jason Effner, and we got Nick Delguide, and we got Tim Cortad, and even Ryan Peters was involved for a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then took it to the next level. He says, but you created this, this family there, and I want to create an extended family. Well, now he's 35,000 members strong. So
and that's where we first crossed paths, right?
Yeah. Well, I coached him. He was my captain in my 92 team.
Well, you and I've crossed paths at the
yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly right. You're right. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you there. but you're right, we did. And so I heard these stories, and there was about 5 or 6 guys. And the other one that was so poignant to me was Jason Thomas, Aaron Grossman's half brother.
Oh, okay.
And Jason, about 15 years ago, came back. He was a 2-tour Army Ranger in Fallujah.
Oh, wow.
And he came back, and I was at a client of mine's called Sushi Rock over in Beechwood. And we were doing a grand opening there. And he came, and I hadn't seen Jason since he graduated high school in 1994. This was 2006 or 2007. He walked up to me, he goes, "Coach." And I misidentified him as another wrestler who was terrible. This day he never
You forget it, right?
He gives me shit about this all the time, right? He goes, "How could you think I was that guy?" Anyhow, I said, "Dude, I hadn't seen you. You're, and he looked great. He was this animal, he's buff. And so gave me a big hug, and we had a nice conversation, had a cocktail. And then he went and saw my sister and my mother and my ex-wife at the time, and had a conversation with them, and then left. And then he said, and I went over to my sister, and I said, "What the heck were you talking to Jason so long about?" She goes, "Well, he told me this story that when he was in Iraq, he said the only thing that saved his life and got him through it was what he went through with wrestling. He said, you and Scott basically saved his life." And I'm like, and I had a cocktail or two, so I started crying, right? How much it hit me. But then I realized, man, maybe you're giving me too much credit. But in the end of the day, what lessons is he imparting upon? Because he just retired as a major in the Army, and he ran a whole company down to Fort Bliss. And he says, we talk all the time, and how many times he's learned those, he's put those lessons into play, in the United States Army. Mm-hmm. And so I started to hear those stories, Michael Goldberg with he and his wife creating Autism Speaks because of Noah, their 22-year-old autistic son. When he was born, they had nowhere to go. Mm-hmm. So he says, "You know what? I'm not going to be denied." So he just put his wrestling cap on, and he went after it, and his wife and he just created this incredible organization. And his wife is amazing. She's even tougher than he is. So with the love, Right. And so, Jared, I wrote a book called Benevolent Capitalism because of this. And in the book, there's a chapter called The Student Becomes the Teacher. Mm-hmm. And so I said, I need to get these memorialized. I need to get these stories memorialized. And before you knew it, I'm getting to talk to Jared too. And he told his story. So it's a beautiful thing. And one of the most poignant ones was when I interviewed Coach Marino, and he shared with us how he shepherded his family through the execution of his grandson, Danny Parmenter, by the very disturbed individual at Chardon when that happened. 3 Chardon students were executed by a very disturbed individual. And boy, it doesn't get any raw or realer or more than that. So that's Bloodtime.
Right. So for the listeners listening to this one, what episode do you recommend? Do you recommend them starting right at episode 1, or is there a one, or is there an episode that you recommend them starting with?
They're all like my children, Jared. I love them all. I love them all, even though some may look a little different than me. I love them all. But I mean, episode 15, Coach Marino, episode 21 or 29 and 30 with it's a double shot of Scott Peters, and we just freeform it. I mean, when we were coaching together, we could finish each other's words, man, each other's sentences. It was that we were that symbiotic. And the kids felt it. And that's why, when I retired, he took them we went from, when I took over in 1987, Jared, we had 2 kids on the team. By 1994, when Scott was the head coach and I had just retired, we took 4th in the state in 7 years. We went from 2 kids on the team to 4th in the state. And you don't do that without being connected.
Right.
So but the Milkoviches, I mean, Jamie.
You had those guys. I forgot.
Oh my God, it was fantastic. And then,
Wrestling royalty, right? That's what the title of it, right?
Exactly.
They are, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And we just recently we did stuff with Shoot, from Vision Quest. I mean, he was fantastic, so so there's a
Frank
lot
Jasper, right?
Yeah, Frank Jasper. He's become a good friend, and he's a doll. He's a really good dude. He's a great supporter of wrestling. And then we've had, the great Greg Urbis, and the amazing human being. And, two of his takeaways are, don't use the sport. Don't let the sport use you.
How
And
true, right?
And the other thing as a coach, he says, never give up on a kid. And those were Howard Ferguson's rules that ranked through to this day. So pretty cool stuff.
That's awesome. That's interviewing Milkoviches and Coach Urbis. I mean, right in Northeast Ohio, how many people dream of meeting those guys, and here you are interviewing and sharing their stories, right? And
sure. Well, how many guys dream of being a 4-time state champ, though, Jared? Too.
Yeah.
You're in rarefied air, my friend.
Yeah, it's things gotta. I was just talking with the prior show. It's just some things just have to happen, right? To injuries and just things have to fall right. And my parents and coaches had a lot more credit than I did. They put me in the position to do it, right?
It's a village to some degree, right? It takes a family.
Right. 100%.
And sadly, we just lost our first 4-time state champ, Mark Zimmer.
Right.
And it's a Beechwood story why he ended up being a 4-time state champ.
Oh, really?
Yeah, his freshman year, he was good, but he wasn't as good as David Fisher, who was our defending state champ from Beechwood, who was a senior. And David, in the semifinals of the district tournament, ripped like half his cartilage in his sternum.
Really?
So he literally couldn't.
Heard this story.
Yeah, he literally couldn't practice all week, and we don't even know how he did it, but he actually won 2 matches at the state tournament, I think, and then defaulted in the 6th. But Zimmer says, and you could find it, on the internet, that if Fisher was at full
capacity,
he would have tortured me. I would not have been a 4-time state champ. Wow. Yeah. So interesting, right? How, like you just said, how everything sort of has to fall into place.
Yes. Yeah, everything. You never know how it's going to work out, and you
got to take advantage of that opportunity, and he did. He stepped in and he won the title. So
right, some people think it's a shoe-in. This guy's going to win it here or there or whatever. Either Dan Gable or Spencer Lee's final high school match, or Brett Metcalf. Years ago, people. It's just things can happen, whether it's injury or bad match or whatever it may be. And I never heard that story. That's pretty wild.
Yep. I mean, you hear about it, right? And then you look at Adam Kuhn beating Schneider in a dual meet.
Yeah.
It happens. It happens.
Just never know, right?
No matter how big and bad of a ass we think we are as wrestlers, there's always somebody bigger, badder, particularly on that specific day.
Yeah. You wrestle the NCAA tournament, you're going to get, you wrestle in 10 weekends, you're going to get 10 different results, right? And it's just who's on. The margin of error is slim, right?
So, when Karelin can lose.
Yeah. Right.
Everybody can lose.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
No, that's 100% right. And so you wrote a book. I didn't know that. So to fill us in on the book.
Yeah, Benevolent Capitalism. I've been in the business world since 1983, and I've seen a lot of corruption and a lot of really nefarious activity occur, and really have put a lot of great people in bad positions, and a lot of great information and great innovations basically on the shelf, never to see the light of day. So, and I have a master's in history, so I've read about the Rockefellers and the robber barons and the reason why we break up monopolies. And Rockefeller used to buy up technology, competing technology and patented technology, and never bring it to market. So, think about if you're that guy that invented the better tire or the better street lamp or the better, and Rockefeller buys that up and just crushes your dream. And that happened over and over again. And so the reason I wrote Benevolent Capitalism is I'm a firm believer in capitalism. I love capitalism. I think it's fantastic. And and it's the best thing that's ever happened to humanity. But I think that we need more access and to both, to two things: capital and power. And it's a very, 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 very small minority that has access to true capital and to true power. And the rest of us are just sort of moving along for the crumbs, And I think that when you really look at it, and cryptocurrency and the internet and social media have democratized this to some degree, where we've had a little bit more access. You're seeing right now with GameStop, AMC. I mean, GameStop today went up to 312. It's still going on with Reddit, what the Wall Street guys on Reddit are doing. But even that's a mouse. And even when the mouse roars, it's still a mouse, And so we're starting to see a little bit of a change there, but it's still a long way to go. And I really believe in the win-win-win scenario in business. And I think that the reason I wrote the book is that there is a lot of great humans that should have access. And once they do, they can do some great things. So that's basically the meat of the book, Jared.
Okay, awesome. Oh, thanks for sharing. I did not know that.
Yep. And it's on Amazon if anybody wants to buy it.
Okay, perfect. Is that you have any other? Is that the only book?
I wrote a book called I Am Beauty, and it's a bunch of short stories and poems about my life.
Awesome.
About my perspectives. And then I just finished a 25-page short story called The Visit. And in that, my older self, goes and visits my younger self and talks about all their fears. And at the end of the stanza, there's about 5 different or 6 different times where I go back to my 5-year-old self, my 15-year-old self, my 25-year-old self. And of course, everything at that time is about that age, right? So, and I put my arm around my own self and I say, it'll be fine. Everything's going to work out. And the last line is, and the man was happy. And every little story like that, and the man was happy. So that's my cathartic way of going back and saying, all right, dude, we're okay.
No, that's awesome. No, thanks for the share. I did not know that. And
sure.
I guess that's the reason why I do this podcast is, to kind of learn more about, the beauty of the sport, what it teaches people and what they have going on in their lives and what they're doing, and
sure,
meet new people. We've known each other for a while, but this is pretty cool to hear this side of you. I haven't heard those stories or those books, so that's awesome.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, yeah, I think one of the biggest things about sport that we miss is creativity. And you'll see like I remember when Ed Ruth started to do his thing, he brought this this athletic elegance to the sport that we hadn't seen in probably ever.
Right.
It looked like Michael Jordan basically out there doing this thing. And there was some creativity to that. And I love the creative aspect of our sport. And I love when people just start to be an outlier and bring stuff in that we've really never seen. And it's cool stuff. So
yeah, we brought in Cliff Fretwell a couple years ago with his scramble camp, and it was really cool. It was a 2-day camp, and that was his thing. He showed variations of scramble, from different positions, neutral, on the mat, whatever it may be. And then he had the kids create their own scenario. It was like a dance, all right, you're going to leg pass here. And then I do that. And it was just the kids, these kids that didn't want to be there all of a sudden, exploring new techniques, and we're excited to be there. And you think, day one, send them home, think about it. You're going to have to perform at the end of the camp, and so you had each, 50, 60 kids there. And at the end of the camp, they had to go out there and do their routine of, it's wrestling, but they had all right, I leg path, and you're going to hop over, and I'm going to do that. And they had to do, I think it was like 10 different variations in a row. And, so they were learning, and they just weren't learning a move. They were learning, action, reaction. And I'll never forget, he had our heavyweight doing a Granby, that he never thought, coming in could do a Granby. And then here's this wrestler that, has that confidence of, wow, I can do this. Right. And that's the beauty of the sport.
Yeah. I show a move that's sort of my move, but it came from Rick Sanders, who was our silver medalist back in the 70s. who was a complete, character. He was like that generation, that hippie generation, right? But back in the day, I would let a guy shoot in on my leg or low, and I would do a Russian spin with my leg and give him a limp leg and end up on top of him. So they'd be catching air. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of hide the head down, right? Do that leg spin and let them feel basically jello, and the kids are like, "Ooh, Bruce Lee."
Caught their attention, right?
I don't do it as well anymore, my friend, but I can still pull it off once in a while. So it's just, but I love that whole misdirection and, thinking that they have you and then you don't. I love that in our sport.
Mm-hmm.
It's truly good. It's truly good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So do you have anything else you want to share? Where can the listeners find you? Obviously your podcast on the podcast networks, but I know you're involved in several businesses or anything.
Sure.
Anything you want to share?
Well, the podcast is everywhere. You can get it on Anchor, Spotify, iHeart, iTunes, you name it. We also signed an agreement with Evergreen Podcasting Network, Jared. And we're on
What's that? One more time.
Evergreen Podcasting Network. We're on their network now.
Tell us about that. How'd that come about? Or
Well, the CEO, Michael D'Aloia, actually was a client of mine 20 years ago.
Okay.
And he came to me and he goes, "I just love your content, dude. I need this content in my stable." And I said, "Cool, as long as I retain the content and retain the ability to market." He goes, "Absolutely, 100%. Just let me share it with the world." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Cool." So we did that, and then that led to meeting with Tim Vaughn at Salem Broadcasting, and now Salem Broadcasting wants us to do 3-minute vignettes of me describing like a Jared episode.
Cool.
So what was the takeaway of our episode, Jared? You know what I mean? What was the takeaway of the Goldberg episode, of the of the Kerry McCoy episode, of the Gabe Dean episode, of the whatever Kyvan Gadsden episode? And so we're in studio actually tonight doing that. I'm cutting probably about a half a dozen 3-minute vignettes, and we're going to sell that throughout their entire radio station network as specials, right at the beginning and the bottom and the top of the news hour.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's exciting. I mean, and it's all, I'm just so blessed to be able to be that, just the conduit of these amazing stories. So that's in. And
you're working along Maverick Peters, right? Tell us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got to meet him, when I was up there, awesome young man. I think it was right before his wedding. And
yeah, he's married. I went to his wedding. He's married now a month, and he's loving life. He's playing house, he said. And he's the oldest son of Scott Peters, my dearest friend on the planet. And he's my producer. And he was my inspiration. I heard him do his podcast, and I said, "You know what? I got to do this." And now my podcast basically is the centerpiece of his network. And he's been fantastic, just fantastic. He's a great kid, great producer, up and coming talent. He's only 23 years old,
mm-hmm.
doing it. And I just love his family. I absolutely adore his parents. He's got great brothers, and it was a fantastic wedding. So, but that's what's going on with that. And then just yesterday, I was interviewed by Cranes, and they're going to be doing a story on a brand extension I'm doing with Bloodtime called the C-Suite Forum. And my very first interview was Kevin Griffin. This is Archie Griffin's nephew, who was the captain of the Ohio State Buckeyes special teams for football for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So, but he's also a president at AdCom, and he was an executive with the Browns and with the Seahawks. And so we are now we're now extending the brand into the CEO suite, and he's our first episode. So that's happening Thursday, and Cranes just did an article on us about that, and as well as our deal with Salem Broadcasting. So it's
wow,
it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, a lot going on. That's awesome.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I just interviewed a guy on the C-Suite Forum, a guy by the name of Dean Adler.
Okay.
Dean Adler is the second son of the founder of Rube Adler Sporting Goods in Solon. But Dean is flat out brilliant. He's arguably the top 2 or 3 people in commercial real estate and industrial real estate in the country. He was a Wharton professor at 31 years old. He runs with Ira Lupert. This is our wrestling connection. Ira Lupert was third to Chris Taylor at the Olympic trials in 1972 and just retired as the head of the Board of Regents for Penn State, Jared.
Wow.
He brought Kale in. He was the guy that brought Kale in.
What he's doing, right?
Yeah. And they're partners in a real estate fund. And the real estate fund is just a really small little real estate fund of 18 billion. So he was a classmate of mine. He was a heck of a jock too in high school, cross country, track, and basketball. And I just interviewed him on the C-Suite Forum, and he had great stories to tell about Ira and some of the other things. So it's exciting stuff. It really is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. I'm excited to hear these stories, and obviously, your Bloodtime. I keep up on that, and thanks for sharing.
We just released Jesse Porter.
Was that yesterday?
Yesterday, Sunday.
Sunday. Okay.
Yeah, our newest Greco-Roman Olympian. So.
Awesome. Yeah. No, that's the beauty of it too. I think we have a couple mutual guests with Kerry McCoy, Josh Malave, but it's just the totally different conversations, right? And you hear these stories, and everyone has a million stories, and it's pretty cool hearing, the conversations you have with them, and then what I have with them over here. And it's just, we're blessed with some great people, not just in Northeast Ohio, but across the country in the sport. It's
and I love what you're doing, Jared. It's great. You nail it, man. Keep doing it, bro.
Yeah.
Keep doing it.
Well, thanks.
Blessed to be on this. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time, and we'll keep in touch.
You got it, Jared. Stay strong. Keep coaching, man, because we need great people in our great sport. And stay strong. Hopefully, this season will be a lot more relaxed than last one. So
it will be. It will be.
God bless, man. Peace.